Evo-Dualism is a set of ideas based on us having evolved to have minds. What that tells us amounts to a new natural philosophy, a new way of thinking about how the world is put together, what it consists of. Our worldview today is based on modern physics, but this leaves us short of ideas we need for understanding consciousness and human nature in general. By bringing in concepts drawn from mind and evolution, I aim to put that right. A modest ambition. I've already introduced dualism and Evo-Dualism in talks in this channel. I link to them in the comments. This talk follows on from those talks. It's about, okay, now what? What's the point? Where's the benefit? Starting out, I warn you, this is a personal project. It's new. It's all blue sky thinking, just making things up, trying to imagine the future. Think of it as exploring a hypothesis. If that's not your cup of tea, please turn elsewhere, or I'll be embarrassed. Here's a quick summary of dualism and Evo-Dualism. Dualism, mind and matter are entirely different forms of reality, yet they can interact with one another in both directions. Mind can interact with matter. Evo-Dualism involves genomes. Evolution began with genomes evolving and going on to evolve by developing first mind, then consciousness. Only then could they create creatures like us with minds and consciousness. So genomes have minds, are conscious. By mind, what I mean is mental abilities being connected to one another by consciousness. Here's how mind might have originated. Origin of life. The young Earth saw vast flows of energy. Anything that could speed up how fast energy could dissipate would be favored. This would have led to machinery helping to speed up that process. This then evolved to become intelligent machinery like our computers. This became the first life. Origin of mind. Once this intelligence was detected by the process of evolution, it began to evolve. This led to all the intelligence involved in a creature becoming incorporated into a genome, a single molecule coding for all that information that could split into two copies, making it possible for life to reproduce itself. Over time, by evolving new mental abilities, genomes amplified that intelligence. Origin of consciousness. As genomes evolved greater intelligence, they found themselves becoming conscious. They evolved to become more conscious. That tells us consciousness must be real for evolution to detect it, and must be beneficial for intelligences with mental abilities like us. Some basics about consciousness. Consciousness provided genomes with enough benefit in conjunction with their intelligences for them to evolve it further. That tells us that for minds, consciousness is beneficial. Very recently, our genome built into us a very high degree of consciousness. We know what consciousness is like from our own experience of it. Now some specifics. What consciousness does. Consciousness acts like a bus in a computer. It's a channel where mental abilities can talk to each other and deliver instructions. Thinking. Consciousness can abstract mental experiences into thoughts. It can employ thoughts to decide what to do next. It can then engage mental abilities to execute those thoughts arrive at decisions. Being able to do this would have made consciousness worth evolving. Free will. Consciousness appears to be a property of matter with processes entirely different from physical processes. Physical processes are determined by physical laws acting on prior events. Conscious processes are not determined like that. Creativity. Evolving new kinds of living creatures is the most creative process I can imagine. So it seems consciousness can be creative. So, with us becoming conscious, we can be creative. Okay, where are we? Genomes bothering to evolve greater mental abilities than greater consciousness suggests we could benefit from knowing more about them. Where shall we look? I've suggested we look at how we evolved. But notice, I've left out entirely science's mechanism of evolution, Neo-Darwinism, or the modern synthesis. That's an entirely physical mechanism. Creatures made by it would be entirely physical. That's what we've got used to thinking about ourselves. But my mechanism is built on mind. This releases us from the limitations of a purely physical mechanism. Adopting a mechanism built on mind opens up enormous new possibilities. So that's our next step, how to glimpse those possibilities. I have two suggestions. One involves studying how genomes evolved. Living creatures are hugely complex and amazing, telling us genomes have immense mental abilities. Can we, by studying how living creatures evolved, identify those mental abilities and incorporate them into our own minds? I described this happening in a story published in this channel, Children of the Genome. Link in the comments. There'll also be a link on screen following this talk. My second suggestion involves the mental abilities genomes built into us. Can we tap into those more directly? I begin by assuming everything a living creature comes into the world with originates as code in its genome. For example, how a bird builds its nest, how a spider spins its web. They don't need to be taught that. They're born knowing how. Let's call these innate mental abilities. And let's assume they originate as code in creatures' genomes. I can't imagine where else those creatures would come by those skills. They're in creatures' genomes. In us, this would include all the mental abilities we're born with, or that develop in us later without us having to be taught, such as how to have sex. Some of the innate mental abilities we come with, we notice in ourselves and other people, but there could be many more that we haven't yet noticed. Let's imagine applying artificial intelligence to all forms of human behavior and identifying the code corresponding to them in our genome. Then let's suppose we create a language we can translate genome code into, that we can understand in terms of the abilities they represent. We could then use this language to understand what genetic code stands for, what it means for us. Let's suppose eventually we can use it to translate all genetic code into the corresponding innate mental abilities, whether we already know about them or not. Now we have a treasure. We can access every kind of human talent written in our genome, not only those we already know about, but also those we never knew we had. What kind of a society could we imagine building on this treasure? Instead of the few talents we already know about, we'd have available to us the entire spectrum of talents humans could possibly access. Any accomplishment we needed could be translated into talents needed for it, available in genome code. Then we'd find individuals with those talents and train them to further develop those talents to meet the demands of those accomplishments. Example, what talents do we want in a national leader? Figure out the talents needed and pick him or her out of the national genome database. On a personal level, becoming aware of all the talents resident in our own genome, we could pick out those we'd like to develop further, knowing we have the resources needed. Embracing such benefits could lead to a new society. Today's thinking that we evolved through a purely physical process of evolution makes us seem merely material creatures fit only for a consumer economy involving material goods. But instead, we could live in an economy dominated by the development of superior talents. Those talents would be our primary commodity. Wow. I'm hoping by posting these talks to find others pursuing something like what I'm calling Evo-Dualism. If that's you, or you know of someone else, please leave a note in the comments. And how does Evo-Dualism strike you? Is my presentation coherent? Does it make sense? I'd really appreciate the feedback. Following this talk in a moment, you get an opportunity to click through to a related video and to subscribe.